and welcome. I'm Bruce Elder from the Maine Vintage Race Car Association, and on behalf of our association and our sponsors, Elevation Station and Oxford Auto Sales, we'd like to welcome you to the latest installment of Vintage Racers Roundtable. It's a series of programs where we are bringing together some of the legends of auto racing in Maine and sharing stories and taking a look back at remarkable careers. We're here at the studio at Lincoln County Television. I'd like to thank Larry Seidlinger and his team for helping putting this together once again. Our co-host, as always, is Pete Silver, and Pete, it's always fun to sit down and talk racing with you. Pete is kind of a legend in Maine racing, a member of the Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame and also the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. So what a program, a special program we have for the folks today.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is something new for the people that watch this show all the time. They're aware that we've started doing the show with mainly drivers. Then we added crew chiefs, crew members. This time we're doing a family, the children of two of the most iconic racers in Maine, the Libby family, Bob and Phil Libby. Two drivers that are in multiple Hall of Fames, had unbelievable driving careers, and spent a lot of their time, even while they were racing, supporting the sport in several different arenas. We have their children here, Bob's son, James, Phil's children, Gail and Dale. And I think they've preserved so much history, we probably don't even need to be here. They could just talk amongst themselves. But you have tremendous history with their fathers and also the three children growing up. So I'm going to be more of a spectator here, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the accomplishments of these guys.
Yeah, this is a special one for me. Both Bob and Phil Libby were kind of mentors to me, starting way back in around 1960, to date myself. I did their induction into the New England Hall of Fame as brothers, and I can't think of anyone in Maine racing with more impact on the development of racing and raising the level of professionalism in Maine racing. There's just so many ways in which, beyond being tremendous drivers, Bob and Phil just had a phenomenal impact on Maine racing. So this is a great program, and want to certainly give Jim and Gail and Dale a chance to maybe start things off with early impressions. You usually start with that, don't you?
Well, we usually it's a driver or a crew member. We usually say, put the wheel in your hand. So how old were you when your dad was really rolling along?
Well, I was, my first trip to Beech Ridge was in 1961, and I have film of it.
How old were you?
1.
So
I was born in 60.
My word.
And I have film of it, and so we had a guy on the pit crew had one of those old cameras, and we had just built the modified 39 and had still a bomber, and took them both to Beech Ridge. And the bomber that we took to Beech Ridge, we sold right after we won. Sold right after. Of course, I don't remember the win because I don't remember everything when I was 1 years old. Excuse me. But I have the film of it, and we won, and we sold that car to Bob Babb, and he went on to have a Hall of Fame career too.
Absolutely.
With that car.
Yeah. Yep. Through conversations with your dad, do you know what inspired? Did your grandparents race? Anybody in your family race before your dads did? Because I don't know if there was racing before your dad started racing.
Nobody that I know of, and if they did, it was before I was born. But
So you don't know what put a wheel in your dad's hand?
I don't. My grandfather did have a motorcycle for a while, and enjoyed it. But my father was in World War II, and he became an engineer and got so that he was working with engines and motors, and I think that mostly Uncle Phip and his, I call him Phip. We get rid of the L's.
I know you do.
We get rid of the L's.
That's right.
But his early success at Beech Ridge brought my father on.
Okay, that makes sense. And he did have some.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Do you, either one of you know what put a wheel in Phil's hand? Your dad's hand?
My father was always involved with the mechanics.
Yeah.
And at one point, he probably could have been racing a John Deere tractor, because that's where he did a lot of turning of the wrenches. But Uncle Bob had the skills of welding, you know, and then my dad, they just started putting things together, and one of our uncles had a salvage yard.
Wow.
So everything was taken out of those salvage yards to start their career.
Salvage yards, that was the holy grail back when we were racing,
It was
wasn't
the gold.
So, it sounds like it was I'm glad you said what you said about Bob and Phil. They did everything kind of together.
All the time.
So you had other brothers. They had brothers that were involved too, didn't they? Roger?
Also, my Uncle George, he also had a little salvage yard behind his house. I don't know if it was a legal one or not, but anyway, he was really highly mechanical. And I mean, just seeing some of the stuff he could create.
Yeah.
And so he was so involved with them. And then they had a brother, Richard, but he got involved later on when they were racing pretty steady.
And he was a lot younger.
Yeah, he was younger, yeah. Not,
By the way, Richard drove a car that my brother and I had in 1963. It was only part of the season.
Yeah.
And it was very much like the 99. I think that's why we bought it. A guy in green, who was Bob Brown, had it.
Yeah.
I think it had been number 16. It became 19. This was before I did any driving, but Phil's younger brother, Bob,
he
drove the car for a while.
Well, Richard drove the 39 for a point when Clint Abbott owned it. And actually, he and Clint Abbott were involved pretty good on the car. And Richard could drive okay, but somehow he never could stay out of trouble on the track.
Yeah.
So I'm glad so the car was already number 39.
Yeah, Clint Abbott had
Okay,
it.
that's usually another question we ask. Where did the numbers come
Well,
from?
the original number that they had going back to Oxford too is 93, and they wouldn't let him have 93
Somebody already
at
had
Beach Ridge, so they just shifted
Swapped
the
the
two
numbers.
around.
Right.
They swapped it to 39. And 99 and 39, I mean, all growing up, like my father raced a number 5, which you've seen some of the pictures. And other numbers too, but those were the two that we remember as children.
Right. And there are versions
Modifieds.
of each one of them. The 39 had multiple versions, multiple cars, and the 99 was came along with Ray Snell and Galen Wilson, and they built that. But
It looked like there's a couple different versions of the 99 too. There.
Yeah,
a lot of them.
Kind of a Flintstone buggy than the one you got now.
Right.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that you showed.
I have the one you still put your feet through the floorboard
Yeah.
and pedal like hell.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I remember my father's cars were like that, no floorboards.
Yeah.
I think for people who probably never saw Bob or Phil race, when they were inducted into the New England Hall, realizing that a lot of people would have never seen that, I thought it'd be helpful to liken their style to familiar names. So for Bob, I likened him to Terry Labonte because he was very smooth, very calculating racer. Phil, on the other hand, was more of a Dale Earnhardt, perhaps Teddy Christopher style. He was after it. If he started in the back, you knew he was one way or another, he was going to go to the front. And so their styles were different, but both very successful. Obviously,
Right.
I think Phil did a lot more racing than Bob did, so hence a lot more,
He has the
statistics.
stats show a lot more stats than Bob had.
He was also on the dance floor a lot too.
Yeah.
My father tended to stay away from the dance floor.
So when you talk about him starting at the rear of the pack with the 99, I used to get upset because he didn't have to start in the back. And I said, why do you keep doing that? He goes, you got to race somebody. He says, you're not going to race them from the front. So he goes, I want to race. And that's why a lot of times he didn't have to start in the back, but he did because he wanted to go at it with everybody, you know.
And back in those days, there were a lot of cars. There was none of this
There were like
12-car
30
field.
33 cars or
Close to
something
30
like
cars,
that. Yeah.
probably most of the
Exactly.
time.
Yeah.
So when do you come onto the scene and start relationships with these people, the Libby family?
I first went to Beach Ridge in 1960.
Okay, so they'd been racing for a while by the time you got there.
Yeah, so that was my earliest encounter, and we had a construction business, had a John Deere bulldozer. At that time, Phil was working at
John
Clyde
Deere.
Estes
Right.
John Deere shop
Yep.
on Route 25,
Yep.
So that was a connector in addition to seeing him race. A little while later, I went to the University of Maine, which is University of Southern Maine. That was Gorham State First Teachers College, and then Gorham State College. Phil was the head of maintenance, and I was a student there. And I probably spent more time when I had a break, and I knew he had a coffee break or lunch, down talking with Phil. So we just developed a tremendous friendship, and both racing and outside of racing with both. So, and then we can pick up on other things, but
Yeah, I want to get to some of the
Statistics.
accomplishments. Yeah, we'll talk the stats, and we'll go back to so many efforts in supporting the sports and other areas. But so Phil, it looks like Phil started. I don't know when exactly he started, but he won the Beach Ridge Bomber Championship. I don't know if it was a point deal or a race at the time in 1956.
He actually started in 49.
Yeah, 49
But
when he started, yeah.
Yeah, but there aren't a lot of records
Right.
for some of those races. But he started late in 49. He wasn't at the first race. I don't
Okay,
think
it's
he was
got
at the first race.
It's got
at Beach
June.
Ridge.
You're right about records. Ken
Yeah.
Lane dives into the archives.
He
Right.
does a great job.
And we've got June 28th, 1950.
Yeah.
It started.
Sounds about right,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and 147 feature wins, 313 top threes, 226 feature or prelim wins. I'm sure that's the semi
Yep.
or the feature. 500 feature or prelim top threes. God, we've had a run of that in the last few weeks. My God.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
And 495 starts at Beach Ridge, 43 at Oxford, 7 at Lewiston, 5 at Sanford, 4 at Unity, 3 at Arundel. 1958, Oxford Plains Bomber Championship at Oxford. 1960s mind-boggling. Class A points championship, 21 wins and 5 seconds. What were there, 27 races?
27.
27. So what happened
So
was
that's 26
when,
right
when he had the 21 wins, the only reason he didn't do some more that he would collect is mechanical issues.
Oh yeah, well that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or home and drew. You never know.
Yeah,
But I mean,
Holmes was a great driver.
Yeah, before we jump over to Bob
Yeah.
here, that's another thing I want to talk about. We got all these accomplishments, and we talk about accomplishments, but we don't talk enough about the people you have to go through to achieve that. To your point, now
Exactly,
you've got a
yeah.
Homer Drew, you've got a Ralph Cusack, you've got a Dick Walton-Hume.
All of them, we
Garrett,
remember
yeah,
racing.
Dick Garrett was incredible.
Great driver.
His own brother.
Peterson, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't stop. And
Yeah.
as it moves along, then you got a McCabe that shows up, and Jeff Stevens and
Darvo.
Darvo.
Yeah.
I mean,
Those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take a second and you have enough experience and knowledge about racing and you put it in that perspective, that's winning a championship is great, but to win 90% of the races against those people is
Yeah, good
Right.
year.
is a year most people never.
Yeah.
Even if you have good years, you don't have a year like that.
And
Yeah.
know,
you're
that's-
never the most popular man when you win all the time, either.
Yeah.
There are a lot
That-
of
yeah.
emotions that
I
go
could,
along
yeah, and I
with
could tell you a good story about Oxford Plains Speedway with my dad, with Bob Baer. Bob Baer was getting tired of my dad winning at Oxford Plains. So when he came up one time, Bob approached him. He says, "I want you to go home. Now I'm just going to pay you to go home because the people in the stands get a little tired of
Yeah.
you, winning." So my dad, he's a good businessman, right? So he said, "What if I don't race? I have somebody else race that vehicle."
Yeah, and it's still in the
And
lineup.
so
yeah.
Bob said, "All right," he said, "but I better not see you in that." He says, "You'll never be here again." Sure enough, they end up winning it.
Who drove?
I think one of my uncles, or the mechanic.
One of his brothers?
maybe-
One of his brothers?
Yeah.
It wasn't my father. I don't
No,
think
no,
it
but
was.
I think it was one of the brothers. But anyway, he wins. Bear is not happy.
Not bad.
But he was to his word, so
Yeah.
they were still able to come back and keep
Yeah.
racing.
That's a pretty wild story. So we'll get over here to Bob. He only started about half the races that Phil did.
Yeah, he started later. His career started
54.
later. Yeah.
We
that
got
sounds about
54
right.
to 80. 288 documented starts, 34 wins, 108 top threes, 79 feature or prelim wins, 240 feature or prelim top threes. He raced Class A, Class B, and a limited sportsman. Is that 3 different divisions? Class B
Yeah.
and
I
limited
don't,
is
I
different.
don't remember him ever in a limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember that one.
It
but-
said 244 Class A starts, 36 Class B starts, and 6 limited sportsman starts. His first, it said milestone wins, May 1957, first feature. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I tell
Oxford
you a good
Plains.
story.
Yep,
Both stock car and bomber features.
Yeah.
yep.
So the
Jesus, that's a good way to
Good start.
start.
Yeah.
the first race I think was the best story because he was in a pickup truck.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a white pickup, and he by far beat the entire field. I've got great pictures of it, right?
Is that one?
Yeah, that one right there, and then the number 16.
Yep.
And then the next year they banned pickups to run against the rest of the cars. So so the rules back then weren't what they are today. Today every single specification is everything matters. Back then it didn't. So what we did was take the gear ratio.
I was
in
told
the
to ask you
truck.
this, by the way.
Yeah, take the
Yeah.
gear ratio in the truck, put it in the car. So we continued to win. I think my father's best year was probably 66. 65 and 66, he won the New England Dirt Track Championship.
It said 65 Beach Ridge New England Championship
Yeah.
race. August 65, August 66, the Beach Ridge New England Championship race.
That was his wheelhouse right in that time.
June 70 Father Day Classic. September 70 Labor Day Classic. Last career win 1980 Beach Ridge Limited Sportsman.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that if Bob had raced more, he'd have
Yeah.
a whole lot more wins because he was very capable.
Well, he raced clean.
And well, he took care of equipment. He's
Yes.
a lot like Ralph
Yeah.
Cusack, who was probably had the reputation of being one of the smoothest ever, probably
Yeah.
Right.
at Beach Ridge, and Bob was a lot like that.
Yep.
So
Yeah. He was president of the association for 6 years, and I think he enjoyed that part of it. And as he, early on figured out that the rules were important, and I brought some of those old rule books with me, he had a lot to do with the development of the rules.
yeah, he did. As I said, kind of at the outset, I think both of them were responsible for just raising the whole perception of racing because they were so professional. And Bob in particular, I think, in those years of being president, I mean, they ended up bringing very outstanding business people to the track, outstanding athletes from other sports to the track.
Oh,
The
yeah.
governor, remember when
Yep.
Governor Curtis
That's
came?
right.
I think
Yep.
there's a picture somewhere of Phil, I think,
Yep.
one the night that he was there. So they just did things, and with the paper, they did a lot, with publicity, which we've always struggled with in Maine, I think, publicity for auto racing. But they were able to, I think, just build a lot of bridges that maybe hadn't been built because they were very professional and
Yeah.
realized how important that was.
That's
So that's a
huge.
dimension a lot of people wouldn't know.
We had to. I have to at least give some credit to Jim McConnell, the owner of Beach Ridge, because he joined with the association. They worked perfectly together, and they got a lot of press releases and publicity, and all the stuff that you see researched from those newspapers that was generated really from them.
But they both gave back more than they took. From what, I've been around for a long time, and you look at it and how people treat racing, and I was flabbergasted. They just never, even while they were competing at a high level, they never stopped giving to the sport and making it better. And I believe I've seen a picture at Unity when he was
yeah.
president of the Pine Tree Racing Association.
Oh, yeah.
They had Pine Tree Day at Unity when all the kids came from Pine.
Right, yep.
And I believe, back to the governor deal and the promotion, there's a picture of your father, and I don't know if the winner was Keith Fuller, one of the Robinson's
Yeah.
boys, but I think the governor, might have been Governor Curtis at the time,
Yeah,
was standing
yeah,
there
well,
with
I
him, I
got a
believe.
picture of him right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
and,
I believe that was the deal.
We also brought up Sugar Ray Robinson, the boxer.
Oh
We
yeah,
had a
the
couple
dominant
boxers.
boxer at the time.
Yeah, a couple of
yeah.
boxers.
To Beach Ridge?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then he got lucky he didn't get hit at the race.
Yeah, that'd be a good place for it.
Yeah.
So Bruce, rather than me just blatting away here, you know a lot about when they were both presidents of the Maine Stock Car Racing Association. Both of these guys, I mean, they dominated actually decades of leadership in those decades.
Right.
While they're still competing, that's the part that blows my mind, and they're trying to control it, make sure it's consistent.
I think
So-
it was the respect that they garnered. Jim said they had a great relationship with the track owners. First it was Jim McConnell, then it was Calvin Reynolds,
Yeah.
and then Ralph Cusack.
Yeah.
The association, which that type of thing doesn't exist today, I think worked very well as long as the owners would cooperate. And I think for the most part, there were times when there were disagreements, but I think both Bob and Phil were really good at using appropriate, diplomacy, I guess you'd say, with the track owners, realizing you can't be banging heads, or finally the association would go away. And it didn't go away until the Cusacks turned the sanctioning to NASCAR.
Yeah.
Somebody has asked me before, well, when did that go away? I said, well, you couldn't have two groups sanctioning the races
Right,
at
yeah.
the track. And they also covered some of the races at Oxford Plains in those early years before Bob Baer.
Yeah.
Beech Ridge ran races up there like on either Friday nights or Sunday afternoons. There was kind of a time when things were kind of idle at Oxford. It was paved, but before Baer got it and things really expanded.
My father sanctioned the first race at Arundel as president of the association, and Biddeford.
Yeah,
Biddeford had
yeah.
that track
Wow.
for a short period of
Yeah,
time.
in a gravel pit.
And a gravel pit. So everyone that had a gravel pit, like Cherryfield, they seemed to want to start a track.
Yeah. Well, they thought they kind of had a banking
Yeah,
establishment.
there's a lot of banking was already there.
So I'm assuming this is an elected position.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that really, to me, stands out when you put it in that perspective, because the longevity of both of them being reelected says a lot about their respect and their leadership abilities. For people to, races are never happy. That's just how that goes. You're talking about
Yeah.
squabbles. And usually the guy that's at the head of the table is the target.
Yes, and I
And
had
his decisions. That's usually how people look at that, because
Right.
the guy that's having a hard time believes that the guy at the table's made rules
Right.
or decisions that hurt him. And these guys keep getting reelected and reelected, so
While they
that's
were
incredible,
competing
really.
while they're
against-
competing against them.
and the Maine State Stock Car Racing Association had, I think it were 600 members or more, so it was a
Holy.
pretty
Right.
big,
It was a big
Yeah,
club.
very big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you hit a good note. For them to keep getting reelected speaks to the respect they had, even though they were rubbing wheels and more sometimes with people who were going to be at a general meeting voting either yay or nay to have them continue.
Yeah.
And they did for a lot of years.
Yeah, and the thing that's even more incredible, you got two brothers racing against each other and winning a lot of races. And usually that's a conspiracy deal.
They handled that
and
really
it's
well.
still.
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw them get angry at each other.
Oh, no.
But
Never.
the guys running behind them got to be saying, "My God, they're stacking the deck here somehow." If they're, the leader always gets blamed for everything. Leadership.
Yeah.
And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's just mind-boggling
What
to me.
what I saw over the years too is, they had the competitors out there they raced against. I remember our house, there's Russ Nutting showing up, Homer Drew shows up, and I'm asking
Goodwin
my
Hannaford.
but I'm
everybody.
asking my dad, why is Homer Drew here? He's driving against him. He goes,
Yeah, I know.
no, he goes, we're friends.
Yeah.
And I could never believe, because to me, when it was the competition, well, just you're just competition and that's it. But gee, they'd show up at the house, and I think they just helped each other out all the time.
I think mature, professional-minded people, I think that's the process now. There's
Yeah.
always another group that's going to hate no matter what. But
Yeah,
Well, you had to be, Pete. One of the things that, if you think about it, both of them had to deal with the suspensions. They had to deal with the fights in the pits.
Yeah.
The rules.
All the stuff that we saw.
That's a lot.
The stuff we saw as kids, we actually enjoyed.
Right.
It was like the
Oh,
fight.
yeah.
That was
There's a
racing,
fight in the
but
pit.
yeah.
But wasn't your dad, he boxed when he was in the
Oh, he was a
service?
boxer, yeah.
So,
he was a boxer in the service.
With that arm length, you don't argue with him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like to bounce back to your comment
Yes.
about the relationship between Phil and Homer Drew. They had probably one of the most classic battles in the B modifieds when Phil was in that what they call the Pure Hell Camaro,
Right.
Yeah.
and Homer Drew was in Jerry Seavey's number 22 coupe.
Right.
And here's a quote from Phil. Talking about 72 Son Phil was dominant force in the Bob Michaud Pure Hell Camaro. Phil relates that some of the best memories are the duels with Homer Drew in the Seabees number 22. And Phil captured the title in 73.
Yeah.
Also, the
That's-
22 had lettering on a rub bar on the outside, said Libby Bar on it.
Yes.
There might have been another that, yeah, I think
Another
Bob
word?
Bushley called them Libby bars.
Yes.
Yeah,
The rub
yeah,
bars.
they had it painted right on the bar.
Yeah.
And the paint didn't last long.
Who built the Camaro? Your family built that too, or somebody else
Bob
built it?
Michaud, I think, had started the Camaro, and then somehow, I think he'd taken it to the track one time. They weren't doing. I can't remember who started.
Ray Leach.
Ray Leach. They didn't do that well, so I don't know if it was the day that Ray Leach just wasn't feeling right. Something was going on. My dad had the chance to drive it. He went out there. That was it.
Anyway.
He just he took it out and went because
Loved it.
and from
Went
there it was
that good.
history.
It's a great
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
It was a great car, and the handling of the car was a lot different than the other cars.
Old straight
that he
axle
used.
coupe, I would think
But
so.
he
yeah.
wasn't coming down the straightaway completely sideways like he did with the
With the
99.
99.
Yeah.
But he loved. I know that my brother Stephen was telling me about the races between Homer Drew and the Pure Hell Camaro, and
They were awesome.
they finally came up with a request that if they could find someone who could beat Homer Drew,
Like a bounty?
they would give them. Joe Tufts and Warren Hamilton had started Scarborough Signs, so they said they would give a paint job
Paint and lettering.
and lettering. So they would give that as a gift to the person who beat Homer Drew, which was Dad in the Camaro.
Yeah.
So they took it into the shop and they re-lettered it, put Pure Health and a few other things on there, and a gold leaf number 2.
Yeah.
And so that's how it got its beautiful paint job. And I was even having a conversation with Andy Cusack the other day, and he was saying, here I am, I'm Ralph Cusack's son, but I'm just a kid, and I'm out there in the pits, and I'm watching that Blue Deuce, that car, a number 2, also blue, his father was Blue Deuce, come out and race, and he said, I never saw such a beautiful car, and I just loved watching him race.
Those must have been, that and the Homer's Camaro must have been the first two like that.
Yeah, he had.
I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both two great cars.
Oh,
Beautiful. Oh, yeah.
Great
So-
vehicles.
Yeah.
The J2 and everything,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
So the car that comes to the shows, is that the original car?
Which one are we talking
Pure
about?
Hell?
Nope, I did a reproduction of that.
You did that?
Yeah.
No
My
way.
brother and I did that.
Stephen,
Well, I was going to ask about your brothers, and
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. So luckily he works for a company that does fabrication and stuff like that. So they gave us a nice climate control bay.
wow.
And thank goodness to Steve Peller in finding a chassis, which was Dick Wolstenholme's chassis, off a Generation 2 Camaro maybe. But it had the longer body.
Yeah.
And so I went up to Freeport and I got that out of there. And then they
Goldenrod Garage?
Yeah, and not Goldenrod, but Dave's that owns it. But anyway, what they did was I went up and Dave goes, I don't have much left for Camaro bodies. So I went out in the woods and I finally found one, and I come and said, that's about all I can do. They come out with the forklift dropping on the trailer. Next thing you know, Steve Peller go over to his house. He goes, he got something for you. And that was a chassis from one of Dickie Wolstenholme's cars. And so what we did, we actually had to shorten it up because the back, because the generation was different. I couldn't believe it. They took and they lifted that thing. They dropped that 68, 69 body on, and it was like perfect.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
a cool looking car.
yeah, and we just thank goodness we had people that helped us do the reproduction of 39, and they wanted in on that Pure Health 2 Camaro. And when we got done, my brother was like, we hadn't even spent a penny on this thing, you know?
That's a rare racing adventure.
Yeah. And I will tell you, 39, you know how it is when you start building a race car, you keep saying, well, I'll probably put something used on it. No, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. Next thing you go, like, you know, a little over $8,000 later on 30. Oh, I hope my wife's not watching this. But anyway,
Part of the addiction.
yeah, about $8,000 later, 39's done.
Yeah.
And probably more. But anyway, having that crew come in, and I mean, it's like, get the hell
That
out of
must
the
have
way.
been
and let us at
godsend,
it.
wasn't it?
And,
Yeah.
and my brother and I and my cousin did all the mechanicals.
So I was going to ask you the question next about the 39, and you answered it. So that's a repo
Yeah,
too.
it's
Yeah, and that's all real steel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Did you sell it to Roger or donate it?
Well, you know, what happens when you have how many cars and you got one trailer?
Yeah.
Sometimes a
Sure.
little. So actually 39 adopted Roger.
Well, he's the right guy for
Yeah,
it.
but I said, but I'm not going to give it to you. So we put him on a payment plan. I was hoping he was going to miss a payment after about 6 months ago. I want it back.
Repo it.
Yeah, but he is the guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
that
don't-
that
you don't
worked
have
out
to-
well.
You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it going
Oh
anywhere.
my gosh, I
No.
watch him with that. It's incredible.
It's like a baby to him.
It is.
Yeah, it really is. He does a good job with it.
Yeah, like a baby. It's noisy. And it's like,
One thing we should probably talk about, I think Gail brought the Stock Car Racing magazine that had Bob and Phil on the cover, which was
Right.
quite a testimony to the level of respect that we've talked about earlier that both of these men had in Maine racing. National magazine, and was also on a second magazine. And I think a lot of that had to do with Dick Bergman.
It did.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
He
sure.
did.
Yeah.
He did.
Dr. Dick.
He
Yep.
did the article. And the one thing about this whole article, and I can remember just being so fascinated that they actually made it into this magazine, but one paragraph that they started out with is that the Libbies didn't race at Daytona. They didn't race at some of the other places, but the two of them built a history and working relationships that you might not hear about in the other news outlets, but after you read the story and you listen to all of their collaborations and things that they went through, you've got to appreciate why they ended up on the front.
Yeah,
And
well-
then the second one, 20 or 30 years later, they were talking about working together 28 years, and then
Is
the
that
second
Speedway
one.
Illustrated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, stock car
Stock-
racing.
Stock car racing,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in this one, they talk about, well, now it's a 50-year relationship.
Yeah.
And
But they did drive in every single, I mean, all over New England, further south than that. Pennsylvania, I got some programs.
New
from there.
Brunswick. They do
Really?
New
yeah.
Brunswick, oh yeah. Other parts of Canada, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
I assume they did. I just didn't know that history. you know,
Yeah, I've got some of the tickets
Yeah.
in here still,
Yeah.
believe it or
I
not.
think one of the most amazing was when Phil took the 99 that you now have to Thompson.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Thompson, sure.
Thompson is about as different
Yeah.
from Beech Ridge
Right.
as you
Yeah.
could find,
Yeah.
unless you were going to a huge track, a super speedway. But the courage that took to go down there and race against people who were set up to run that with that car that was essentially
Yeah.
a dirt track car,
Right.
although it was a very unique dirt, that was amazing. And
Oh yeah.
I think people were just blown away.
That-
He was
yeah.
outpowered because he just didn't have the engines to compete. And of course, Thompson's long straightaways, you need power there.
Oh, yeah.
Beech Ridge is always considered more of a momentum track. But that was amazing. And like
Steve
you
Pellerin
said, Jim,
just
there's
sent me a picture of him on the track at Thompson.
so many stories. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah,
of-
that's
of
stepping
them.
into the unknown. I've been to Thompson a couple
When I was
times.
a kid, that's how I learned about setup. I went into the garage, right in our garage where we built them, and I'm like, Dad, we got a problem. Because I'm like 7 years old. What's the problem? I go, geez, the left front tire is a different size than the right front tire. And boy, that's the kind of thing that, I learned how to weld in that garage when I was 5 years old.
No way.
Yeah, so he put the big helmet on me. I don't know if you came over, you probably did that too.
Yeah, I've been through that, yeah.
Put the helmet on me. I'm like, Dad, I can't see a gosh darn thing. He goes, you're about to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, hey, I can. It looks like a sparkler.
I did that, and I caught my dad's truck. They were hauling one of the race cars. He said, can you weld a couple of pieces on the truck? And I do the same thing, put the helmet down, I'm welding away. I'm like, man, it's hot. Finally, Dad yelled, it's on fire! And the wood, and the wood on the back of the truck was all on fire. I'm like, okay, that's the end of my welding days.
But our parents did a lot of welding. My father worked for Amatec when he was a welder there, way, way back.
Well, you talked about the mechanical skills they had, and you talk about what they could do fabricating, and that explains a lot about success in the early years. It sounds like brothers and other family members had the same experience. So
when you get three brothers that are very kind of mechanically inclined and like to experiment with things,
which is what they did.
Which is what they did every day.
I'm glad you said that, because it sounds like it wasn't like two separate groups, Phil and Bob. It sounds like it was one big team.
No. When
in
my dad,
a sense, family-wise.
That's right.
Yeah.
When my dad couldn't run, he would give the car to Phil.
Yeah.
He ran the 39 a whole year almost.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
It's just the way it was.
So by now, these two are probably in the pits, and what are you doing?
Well,
it's worth saying that we have a lot of women in our family who also drove.
Yeah, we want to get to that.
I don't know that you ever drove.
I did not.
No, but my mother drove, my aunts drove.
Right.
All kinds of people just got in the car and then won a few powder puff derbies.
Isabel, right?
That's my mother.
Okay,
Yeah.
now it sounds like she
was
won a few
champion.
races.
Yeah,
And-
she was a powder puff champion.
And when we were putting together the mobile museum, I originally had a powder puff section, and I had, Burgess, she raced.
Oh, Helen.
Helen,
Yeah, yes.
Burgess raced, and so I would gather all these pictures, and one of them was my
Isabel.
aunt, and then I came across, I don't know if you gave it to me or somebody, but we had a flag in there beside her picture, and that was a pretty popular section.
So what I saw was, I'll never forget when Isabel drove that first powder puff race, she just went and left everybody.
Yeah, she did.
And I'm going, maybe Uncle Bob shouldn't be driving and Isabel should be driving. Really, she drove.
Yeah, the women that liked it, I can remember them in the 50s on the dirt at Unity.
Yeah.
And there was one lady named Rowena Hatch. The rest of them might have stayed up. When she got in the car, she made the men look about what you're saying.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, she just laid it on the floorboard and was gone.
My parents loved Unity because, and so did Uncle Feb. And he raced often at Unity. My father only raced once or twice at Unity, but it wasn't like the other sand pits. It was really well groomed, and I think one of the keys to Beach Ridge too, it was well groomed. We laid out the clay. It was constantly, McConnell was constantly grooming that thing. But you'd go up to like Ellsworth.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you're going to run, or like Waterville, Oakland, or one of those places. Holy cow.
I went there when I was a kid.
Storms going through
You're
the
right.
radiator.
In Exeter, it wasn't bad, but you're right, the grooming, they just cared for the facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, Beach Ridge was, didn't they have a guy that rolled that stuff up and then rolled it back out, like the top layer or something?
Jim.
At Beach Ridge.
Jim McConnell.
Probably Jim
But
McDonald,
didn't they roll it up
Well,
the top layer or something? And
They graded it.
They graded it
Yeah.
out.
I thought they did something really
Well,
different
they put the
there.
clay over it.
Yeah.
There was not just gravel; it was
Right.
clay, and then they put all that oil
And
on
then
it.
they added all the
Yeah.
oil and the
Yeah.
Buddy
treatments
Sawyer
afterwards.
then graded the track for years.
Maybe that's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
One thing I found out when these cars raced on clay track, when they get done with the races, they bring the top three out in the classes on there. And so I run down to the front stretch, and I made the mistake of sitting on my dad's tire just after he got done racing.
Oh yeah.
Did I ever know that a tire got that hot on a clay
Right.
track? And I probably still got
it
the
did.
mark right there. From,
I can remember when I went down there a few times walking across
yeah.
The
You
first
fall
time, I
in.
thought my shoes almost
I
came
was gonna
off.
say, you leave your shoes there?
Yeah, it was that
Exactly.
sticky.
It was a good track when your feet would stick as you
Yeah.
walked
Yeah,
down
I
there.
Right.
found out that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing we should talk about is the international program that Phil was a part of.
That's a good
I think
one.
he
Coventry.
was kind of with Coventry, England,
Right.
and I don't think any other track in Maine ever established something like that, where Maine drivers went to race in England,
Yes,
and
yep.
a
Correct.
racer or two came from England to race at Beach Ridge. So,
Yep.
Gail, you probably have information on that.
Well, I just, I remember the whole fascination about him saying, well, we're going to England to race. And I race what? How, you know, so, because you weren't going to take your car to there. So it was a very interesting time. Jim McClure went over with my father,
Yeah.
and
Dick Walston-Hume.
Dick Walston
Yeah.
went afterwards.
Tangway.
Larry
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tangway. At one time, Frankie Moses and Wally Prescott, I think,
Yeah.
Wally
went
Prescott.
over. Yep. And so the bottom line is they didn't do well,
No.
but they had a lot of fun doing it.
They told
was
me about it
different.
because, like, Dick Walston-Hume could be as rough as anybody
Right.
if he
Right.
needed to be. But
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was Larry Tangway telling me, he said, you would not believe, they didn't stop the race for hardly anything.
anything.
There could be a car half rolled over and they'd race by it. He said it was unbelievable how rough it was compared to what they were used to. I mean, some people
Right.
thought Beach Ridge was rough, but, and Oxford, you know,
Yeah.
but it's all what you compare it to. And they had cars that had rub rails, like unbelievable.
Well, they were allowed to knock their competitors out of the way.
I've seen pictures of those cars. They
Yeah.
built the rub.
Yeah, apparently it
Yeah.
was that, but what an experience. I mean, and again, the level of, I guess, press coverage was pretty significant at that time, because that just had never been done before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that the Libby brothers were capable of doing and carrying it out. It's one thing to have a dream to do something, but I think for most of the things that might have started as a dream, they were the types who were able to make it happen. And a lot of people don't know those things, know they were great drivers, but there's so many other dimensions that, and I think this is what impressed Dick Berggren so much, because he had tremendous respect for Bob and Phil.
Correct.
And obviously he spent years there hauling from Ipswich, Mass to Beach Ridge to run weekly.
Right.
Guy with a doctorate degree and
Yeah, their longevity and leadership tells a
editor of the
lot.
it was amazing, and it was a lot due to, again, the respect that they brought. You know.
I remember them bringing Frankie Wyman, I think, came back over from England to race. I
Yep.
can't remember what they put him in for a car.
Yeah.
But he was staying at my dad's house. Because my dad didn't drink beer and stuff like that, so he'd come in the house and there was beer sitting on the tables. So he'd take it and he'd put it in the refrigerator. And then and Frankie Wyman would come back and goes, well, where's my beer? It's in the refrigerator. He says, we don't keep beer in the refrigerator. So he took it back out. And because my dad didn't believe him, so Frankie leaves again and Dad puts the beer
yeah.
back in. He goes, we drink it warm and you leave it on the counter, Phil.
That's a nationality deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to bartend at Sugarloaf years ago, and when Reddington North was redoing the area and the Canadians came in to work,
Yeah.
and I'd have to put 2 cases of beer under a hot lamp. In the afternoon. Honest to God.
Yeah.
And then they pile the salt to it, and
Yeah.
you ask them,
Yeah.
what are you doing? And they say it's better for your stomach.
Yeah, but this
I don't know if
racing
it was-
over in England was incredible. I mean, it got so much, just publicated everywhere to people to see that, publishing what was going on.
That's incredible exposure for Beach Ridge.
And we still have memorabilia from that.
Oh, I have the
There's a whole
sweaters, I've
case
got
full of-
everything he had when he was over there.
Yeah.
Damn, I hope you got a family behind you to carry this on.
I wish I had a family behind me that would carry all the stuff around.
So,
Exactly.
just touching on some other highlights on Bob. Pine Tree Racing Association President, 59 to 61. Maine State Stock Car Racing Association, 63 through 68, 70 through 73, 87 through 89. Awarded Maine MSSCRA Lifetime Achievement Award. Beach Ridge Motorsports Hall of Fame, Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame, New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. And over to Phil, similar stuff. God. President of the Maine State Stock Car Race Association, 58, 76, 78, 79, 84, Beach Ridge Motorsports Hall of Fame. Tell me about the Memorial Blazer. Tell me what that is about, this blazer right here on display. Explain that to me.
Well, I think you can do better with that.
Well,
Okay.
it was something, again, the Libby's established a relationship with, I think, not a relation, but Dave Libby, who was the Wynn's distributor,
Wynn's distributor,
in
right.
southern Maine.
I remember
He
that.
became a tremendous supporter of racing at Beach Ridge and the association. And I think it was another thing that probably Bob and Phil together in concert with Dave Libby, who was a,
Great guy.
just
He's a big promoter, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great
Great
businessman, great supporter of racing. Came up with this was a special award. I probably should have brought the criteria, but it was recognizing someone who had just kind of gone above and beyond at the track, in the association. And I don't know how many of those were given. It wasn't a big number, but it was quite an honor.
Yes.
I had the honor of receiving one, so it was
Wow.
it was really
Congratulations.
something. I think Terry Wilkinson, who was
Yes.
very
Yeah, Terry,
close with Bob and Phil and was our secretary treasurer
Yeah,
for years
Terry.
of the association, presented it, and that was quite an honor for me. And so it was just a special award that was recognizing kind of above and beyond contributions.
Nice.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is that when our two fathers made it to the New England Racing Hall of Fame, when they were inducted, Dick Berger, and I don't think liked this very much, but they said, we're going to be on the same plaque.
Right.
And so they were on the same plaque.
That's cool.
They didn't want their own plaque. We're going to be on the same
Yeah.
plaque.
Yeah.
We don't do that,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah,
did it.
but they did it.
That's cool. So he also was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award. Phil was Maine Motorsports Hall of Fame, New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. I've got to read this. It's talking about Phil just raced more. This will take a second, but it's mind-boggling to me. 1956 Beach Ridge Bomber Championship. These are races, not points. 1957 Beach Ridge Class A Championship. 1958 Oxford Plains Bomber Championship. 1959 Oxford Plains Bomber Championship. 1960 Oxford Plains Class A Maine State Championship. 1960 Oxford Plains Class A New England Championship. 1960 Beach Ridge Class A Championship. 1961 Beach Ridge Class A Mid-Season Championship. 1961 Beach Ridge Class A New England Championship. 1962 Beach Ridge Class A New England Championship. 1962 Oxford Plains Class A Maine State Championship. 1963 Beach Ridge Class A 50 Lap Firecracker Special. 1964 Beach Ridge Class A Mid-Season Championship. 1967 Beach Ridge Class A New England Championship. 1969 Beach Ridge Class A Canadian Championship. 1968-9 Beach Ridge Class A Memorial Day Classic. 1969 Beach Ridge Class A Mid-Season Championship. 1970 Beach Ridge Class A Canadian Classic. 1972 Beach Ridge Class A Canadian Classic.
A lot of
Nothing
racing.
like winning a few highlight races, is there?
Won a lot of trophies.
Well, you got to do something for a living.
My
One
word. Well,
one thing I would add, Pete, for those special races, many times that would draw, they'd increase the laps to like at least 50, sometimes 75 or 100.
Yeah.
And it would bring in some other drivers who didn't race there weekly, and some who did it quite often. Wally Prescott, Jerry Dolliver, of course Dick Berger came, Dave Snap, Howie Brown. So it wasn't just the main drivers who it was tough, as we've talked about. A lot of them are Hall of Famers
Yes.
that
Right.
were racing those early years when Bob and Phil were racing. But there were quite a number from New Hampshire and Massachusetts who would come in, particularly for those big races. And you see how many times it was Bob or Phil or
Oh, yeah, Bob's got a
main
list,
driver
too.
that would win,
Right.
which really speaks to the ability they had even when there was competition that was probably, on most people's eyes, perhaps at a higher level.
Yeah, most of those people don't travel from those states unless they got something that has a chance. You know, they're calling something that could win the race. They don't
Yeah.
just show up. Back in those days, it isn't like the 250. You just hope you make the race. You know, those people showed up thinking they could win the race. So that was tough stuff.
That was one of the things that I was fascinated with when they were inducted into the Near Hall of Fame, was that when Dad wrote up his speech, he named a lot of other people that were in the room, the New England racers, that had come to Beech Ridge or he had raced with in other places. And he listed them all, and I had never heard of some of them. There were a few that I remember, you know, actually racing, but I was just fascinated that he could remember all of their names, some of the issues that he had with them when they were racing. And I just remember reading and I said, Dad, this sounds like the mob. You know, these people
It probably was to some degree.
to race, you know, they had these names, and but the people at Beech Ridge, and Dick Wilson-Hume was there, and Andy was there, and you know, those are all names that that brought fans with them.
One I left out, and I sure was Ernie Gahan. Because
correct.
Ernie Gahan
Yes.
in the
What a driver.
early years raced quite a lot at Beech Ridge, but as we know, he became a national champion, and he and Ralph Cusack, of course, were extremely close, and even back when it was racing on the beach, I think it was 1956, quite a story of them, and there was no turnpike at that time, hauling a car down to race, February, and that was quite a thing, but it was tough competition, not just Maine drivers, but beyond for most of those big races that you mentioned.
Yeah, you make a great point about back in those days traveling the roads. People don't understand any of that. You know, like you said, a lot of people listening to this will never see your dad's race.
Yeah.
And in that era, these people going to the races back and forth, they're on the interstate. Easy traveling, you know. And
Well, we tipped over going to Canada. So my father was hauling his car with a, what did they call those long cars? The, you know, with that little hatchback in the back, you know, those long cars.
Station wagon?
Station wagon.
Yeah.
He had a station wagon. So,
How old are you?
Yeah, so they went around a corner and he told my mother, hold on. She's like, why? And then she found out why. We completely rolled it over.
No way.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened, but the trailer didn't roll over, so we were able to have
Flip it
somebody
back
else
over.
bring the car up, and we still raced.
Wow.
That happened.
So, I still want to hear more about your bleacher days, but I want to ask one other
Oh
question.
my
here.
gosh.
Yeah.
Why did either one of you guys ever race?
I like I told you probably earlier we talked, I went out to warm up a vehicle that race car my dad made.
Okay.
And I thought I was tearing up Beech Ridge Speedway. And I had this car go by me and I thought I was in reverse. Happened 3 times, so finally I said, but I had enough of that, and I get bumped right in the back and I go into the pits, get the hell off the track.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, car pulls up behind me. I don't know if it was one of Russ Nutting's car or whose it was they were trying out too. My dad's in that car. And then after I got bumped, I'm not racing.
Yeah.
I said, I could see Bob and my dad just tearing me up.
And enjoying it.
Oh, every minute, I'm sure.
I think his brother Steve and we played so much basketball that my son drives now. He drives in the Legend Series.
How's that? I know you were rolling
It's
along
going pretty well.
good. Yeah.
You know, he's only, he's 15. So, he got out there, did pretty well. We raced a couple of different tracks this year, including Star.
Yeah.
So, we're just kind of ramping it up. But I never did do that because I felt like I didn't have the time. I just went to Beech Ridge every Wednesday when we had them on Wednesdays.
Yep.
Any Saturday night, Sundays when there was a rain, and whatever day it was. I mean, our whole lives, we were at the races.
Yeah, you made a good statement walking in here. We were talking about Beech Ridge and we thought it was never going to end.
Yeah. I thought it would never close.
And speaking on that, I got to ask you, I know you had put in motion at one time and it didn't work out trying to buy a racetrack.
Yeah, I did.
You still have that dream?
I think everybody should, right? Anyone that's in racing that can. I made a couple of offers, and I also engaged some partners the offers admittedly were low, but then again, sometimes people don't want to sell, and so
I know
you give
where
it
you're
all, they
going
don't
with
want to
this.
sell. So yeah, I mean, if that opportunity ever comes by again, I've made other investments at this point, but I really feel
It's
it's
a tough
necessary
climate.
to
It
support
is.
racing, and that's the thing. What do we got now? We got Oxford,
And you got
but
Unity trying and
Unity's
Bangor.
trying to come back. It's great.
They-
We got some up north, but
Wiscasset, the folks.
Wiscasset is
that-
fantastic.
Wiscasset
They've
does
done
a phenomenal
They have
job.
done an unbelievable
They've
job.
done a wonderful job with that track.
Yeah.
It's amazing to go there
Thank
when you're going
goodness.
there at Summerfest and watching all the improvements that they do
What a
every,
track. It does
That's-
a
every
great
week.
job.
That's the point. Most people today, the new owners, by the time 2 years go by, they're complaining about not making any money and everything goes
Right.
in the opposite direction. Every spring when you show up and buy a ticket, you can see where your money went last year.
Right.
It's been
Right.
put back into the facility
Yeah.
to make it better, whether it's for the fans or the competitors. Now you,
Me.
let me hear about your bleacher life.
Oh dear. Well, when Dad was winning a lot of races with a 99, I was in high school and so forth, and you had to, you kind of dress the part. I had the yellow sweatshirt, the black pants, and when you're sitting in the stands and you're cheering very loudly, you get to know all the people around you
I bet it
who
wasn't all
are
cheering.
not fan.
Even the Cusack fans sitting beside you.
Yeah, Cusack fans. And then when you get ready to go down to the concession stands, you're walking down through and you hear, "Boo, Liddy," and you think, I was like, I don't know how that happened, but when you're in the stands and you're next to people, I don't think my father and my mother liked us booing. You just
Yeah, but
hollered.
they-
You
well,
didn't
yeah,
boo, you
that's-
hollered louder.
I mean, obviously you got a
So-
class group going here. Why would
Right,
you do that?
exactly. So you don't talk about somebody else. You just cheer as loud as you can for the person that you want.
Yeah.
So when you're really loud, you get noticed.
I
So-
think it should be mentioned that although Gail never drove race cars, she's been a tremendous,
Oh, God.
tremendous person in terms of the whole Maine Vintage Race Car Association effort, the Maine
The mobile.
Motorsports Mobile
Yeah.
Museum.
Great.
She's been kind of the pivotal person on that, along with John Pettingill,
Yep.
now Steve Pellerin. But I think it just means so much because this is all about preserving the history, recognizing motorsports history in Maine, and you've certainly had a pivotal role in that. And Dale with the 99, and Jim, now another generation coming on. We're going to have a Libby behind the wheel of race cars, I'm sure.
Thank you,
if he's-
Jim.
If he's getting his feet wet, it's in the genes, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, and he
But-
enjoys it.
Wow.
But when you look at all the memorabilia that we've collected and that Dad made scrapbooks from 1950 up until the 2000s, and they were about racing, but they were also included all about the different racers that were there at that time. It wasn't
Yeah.
just Libby races.
There's a
And
picture
you-
of me right there on Ralph's car
Exactly.
when I was a kid.
Exactly.
Ralph Cusack.
Ralph
Wow.
Cusack.
Yeah.
So
Such a great friend.
he collected scrapbooks, but it was about Maine racing. So when you look at all the memorabilia, like your dad had
Yeah, we're okay. We can
jackets
finish
and
this up.
all this kind of thing.
They're giving us the
Yeah,
signal.
your family is given a lot to racing at a high level, and you people still do it. So the state of Maine is lucky. They have you as a group, as a family. And you still do it as a family in a way. I think it's pretty impressive, and we're very lucky. Thank all three of you for taking the time to show up.
You're welcome.
I'm glad we got
Thank
to
you.
celebrate two men that did incredible things,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
from competing to making sure the sport operated at a great level. Thank you.
Well, our time is about up. We hope, folks, you've enjoyed this episode of Vintage Races Roundtable. Again, a production of the Maine Vintage Race Car Association and Lincoln County Television. And again, thank our guests, Jim, Gail, and Dale, kind of recounting a lot of the history of the fantastic careers of both Bob and Phil Libby. Pete, always a pleasure, and we appreciate the work of Ken Lane, who
Yeah.
works up a lot of the statistics for us. Folks, if you would like to hear more about MBRCA and perhaps support this effort, they welcome if you have a business, if you'd like to help with some sponsorship, there is some cost to this. Or if you'd like to learn more about the Maine Vintage Race Car Association, you can go to the website, mainvintagerace.org. We'd love to have more support, particularly younger folks. If this is going to carry on, we need you on board. So again, we appreciate the folks at Lincoln County Television, and again, appreciate you watching, and it's been a pleasure.